And it's Thursday morning, February 6th, and we're now going to talk about data with Crime Research Group. Welcome, both of you.
Yeah, right. Well, I'll get started. We'll introduce ourselves. Thank you for inviting us to come and talk to you this morning. I am Monica Weber. I'm the Executive Director of the Crime Research Group. And to my right is...
I'm Dr. Robin Joy, and I'm the Director of Research.
Great. And so clearly some of you know who we are, and some of you, the newer members, might not know exactly who we are. So I'm just going to give you a little bit of overview. I did provide Nate with a number of documents, and one of them is an organizational overview that's going to, say a lot more about who we are and what we do. So I'll just kind of give you the high level. Crime Research Group. We're an independent nonprofit research organization in Vermont, really focused on the criminal justice system. We provide lots of research, policy input, statistical analysis, and technical support to the legislature, to other members of the other criminal justice partners, to the community. We have been in existence as an organization in Vermont for over 20 years. Prior to being the Crime Research Group, we were known as the Vermont Center for Justice Research. I wasn't with them then, but Dr. Joy was. And with this experience in Vermont as an organization, we have been able to analyze, collect, and report on all sorts of criminal justice data. And we have access through MOUs and agreements to data from the Judiciary, with the Department of Corrections, and then through other specific reports, we're able to get really detailed information from a lot of our criminal justice partners to be able to integrate them, analyze them, and then help answer questions that people may have related to policy. I will say Dr. Joy is, from my understanding, one of the only people, probably the only person in the state who is able to work with the amount of criminal justice data that's available and really take these data and bring them together in an integrated way and report. Just giving her a little bit of a shout out here. So we are an independent organization. We also have a contract with the Department of Public Safety. I just want to acknowledge that the commissioner's here. And we are also something called a statistical analysis center. Most every state has a statistical analysis center. It's something that is designated by the Bureau of Justice Statistics. And through this designation, we are able to access money for research from the Bureau of Justice Statistics. In fact, that's where most of our money and support comes from. We do often have grants or contracts with other partners to provide different services, but I would say the bulk of our money comes from that source. We can talk a little bit about what's going on in the government a little bit later, but of course, with all government-funded grants, there's always a question about what will be continuing in the future, which could impact our organization. So that is who we are. We're going to talk to you about a lot of different things today. Dr. Joy is going to lead you through the criminal justice data pyramid, about all the information that's available, and some of it which we have. And then we're going to get into a few different reports, specifically the Act 40 report, which was from 2023, which required the SAC to compile a lot of data related to justice reinvestment specifically. It was a very specific data request. And so we worked very hard to pull together that data with new MOUs with the Judiciary, with the Department of Corrections, and with the Attorney General's office in order to be able to access and analyze these data for you. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Joy, who's going to show you our fancy piece.
Okay. Still like my fancy pyramid.
Which is also.
We've added to it since last session, last year. So
Also,
we have, yes.
And handout that's on your.
Okay, yes, so you have this on your website. So this is our data systems pyramid. And it shows you the kind of travel of people's experiences through the criminal justice system and what data systems capture the administrative actions that the government takes. And so we want to start where people don't ever come into play into any of these administrative systems, right? Lots of things happen in homes and in public that never get reported to the police that people are experiencing. So, there's a national victim survey, for example. We can't drill down to Vermont, unfortunately. So that's where sometimes we capture that. This is where you listen to your constituents who tell you what's going on. This is where Sarah Robinson from the network comes in and tells you about what the clients are saying in the pro members about domestic violence happening in the home and not being reported. So when we come in to talk about data, we're only talking about data that happens in these official records, right? So it has been at some point reported. For calls for service, there's two main systems in the state, Valcor and Spillman. We've been working with those data for a long time, and we're able to match a lot of these data from the calls to service back into these other systems for for the police, for the charges that are filed, eventually the sentences, and finally into corrections. We're going to go over some data today that we got from a new system that came online, and that's the Attorney General's data manager, law manager system. And I do want to state for the record that the Attorney General had the best data for the Act 40. And so that's a shout out to Willa and to Ann Walker. And I brought them flowers for their very nice data. And then, the essays have a system that's coming online or is online now, and also the Defender General. And so those are other systems that capture other administrative decisions. Once cases are filed, right, then we go into the judiciary system called Odyssey. And because this is a newer system than what we had in the past, Odyssey, we're getting lots of really great data out of it now. We're still learning about the parameters, what's good data, and we have quarterly meetings with the judiciary because I'm in their data a lot, and I say, oh, I saw this in your data, and then they go back and find out why I'm seeing what I'm seeing. So I'm just an extra set of eyes and part of that data quality, process. Sentences also come out of Odyssey, right? What people are sentenced to for their crimes, and then the Department of Corrections, OMS, has what the Department of Corrections does and how they interact with people. Everyone also still has data on spreadsheets, right? Because to change case management systems, to change the variable names in case management systems so that they match across and those sorts of things cost money. Right, because it's a field in a computer system. Some people so you can have the judiciary talk about what fields can they change and what fields can't they change. So sometimes they have the ability to change the drop downs. So if somebody wants to say, we want to add a category for race, like a Middle Eastern as a race or ethnicity. Some systems you can just go in and add that. Some systems you're going to have to pay the vendor and get on a list to have that vendor care about your needs. And so, because these are all national systems too, so there's a process to changing those systems. So I wanted to bring that up as it's just something to be aware of. So we're going to start with Valcor and calls for service. And I warned the member from Brattleboro that we were going to talk about Brattleboro.
I'm just gonna get on. Share my screen here.
So this work that we're going to show you is actually part of the Public Safety Enhancement Team, which is a multidisciplinary group headed by that's from serving the governor's points on violence, the commissioner of corrections, the commissioner of public safety right behind me. I'm sorry about that. I'm really sorry about that. Yeah, she doesn't want that job. And public health and mental health, right? AHS is there. Some of the really great work that's going on there that I wanted to talk about that went to some of Tiffany's point was something called an intersectional analysis. So we provided AHS with data on people who were charged with violence. And now AHS is going back through all of their systems. Did they interact with DCF? Did they interact with corrections? This is modeled after a report that's already done on overdoses, right? So when people overdose, the Department of Health does what's called a social autopsy and goes through those contacts that people have. But what I want to show about here is, so these are data. The reason why I wanted to show this, one, this gives you some idea about Valcor, but also when I come to talk to you, I'm usually talking about people who have been arrested and are going through the system. And what we found in our work with the PSET team is that that there are people in the towns that we've worked with. We worked with Brattleboro, St. Johnsbury, Springfield, Bennington, who are causing disorder. And these disorders don't ever show up in the criminal justice system because they're not crimes, right? They're not rising to the level of crimes. But these are the things that your constituents are talking about when they don't feel safe going downtown or when they feel uncomfortable in public. And there's a human story here that we really just kind of want to talk about and talk about also what the police are doing. So this report came from the Valcor data, and we analyzed, this is what we did for Brattleboro, and we did present this to your select board. So we analyzed 28,000 calls for service, and this involved 54,000 unique businesses. And out of the 28,000 calls for service, there were only 2,000 arrests, right? So a lot of what the police do, and this is really important, is other things in responding to what we're calling disorder. And what we did, Valcor, and you have a data explainer in your packet. There's lots of call types, right, in Valcor that the agencies can create. Noise complaints and disorderly conduct or suspicious person in events. So things that the way the police code the data. We took, there are too many to do good analysis, right? So we combined them, and we combined these things that we called disorder. And if you notice, and this has been true for every department that we've looked at, that these disordered events are the number one thing that these police departments respond to. The number one thing, right? Traffic is next. Motor vehicle complaints. But the number one thing are these disordered events. And then, right, and this is just, what we did is we mapped out where the most disorders were for each of the top 10 locations. In Brattleboro, it's the motels that we're serving as part of the motel program. And so they're the ones that in other jurisdictions, the motels didn't rise up to this level yet, or because of the way the officers are coding things. Sometimes that's the problem. But that's where the disorder was happening that the police were responding to. But what we really want to get to is this, right? So we looked at the top 20 people who were associated with disorder. And if you look at this, what you're looking at is person number one during the study period had 151 incidents for disorder and a total of 198 incidents. And you can see that it kind of, I'll show you this chart so you can see the number of contacts that people have. This number one person here had almost 200, and that it goes down like this. But this is a lot of contact for a human being to have with police, and it's not their job, right? So we took out the people who were the middle school principals who are calling because that's their job to call, or the security guards, right? We took out all of those people, and we're just looking at the people that the police are interacting with. And for this, what you'll see, and these are the charts that I really want to draw your attention.
Before you go ahead, a question, Ken.
I spaced out for a minute.
That's okay.
That was one person?
Yes.
One person had 200 calls for service, yes.
Over a period of.
One individual?
Yes,
Yes.
over a period of time, yes.
Over, it was a 2-year
Two-year period, I think,
in
yes.
this study, it's 2 years.
Yeah. And this is not unusual, sir.
That really doesn't make it much better in my eyes, but.
Yeah. Right, but I
Understood,
think
yes,
that these are the things that I really want to show to you. So like, if you look at number one, and I'm sorry, man, for like,
Yeah.
I am a person, yeah. But these are the contacts that these people had every day, right? So this is, every dot represents a day that this person had a contact with the police.
So can I just add to this? So this one person
Mhm.
that had the contact with the police,
Mhm.
do we know what happened?
Yes,
The police
we're gonna get to that.
visited?
Yeah, so this is the point is that these folks aren't committing crimes, but people are calling about them, or that they are. So it could be that somebody was having was cycling out is really the language that I use, because you'll see in the next graph here what these dots are. So if you go over, yeah, right, how many contacts the people are having per day. So that person on that date had 4 contacts with the police in 24-hour period. This other person, you see these, and you can see these people who are really cycling with substance use disorder, with mental health crises. And so that's what these are. We'll show you on these reports that these folks aren't getting arrested because it's not criminal.
So this, there's nothing safe about being out in the public right now, is it, to turn around public safety, right? With an individual like that, right?
Well, I'm not going to go there. I'm not going to go. I'm not going to go there.
Did.
That's not what I would take away from this. I would say that people use the police as social services, right? And part of the idea behind the PSET team and what we're trying to do in these communities, if you take Rutland and Project Vision, for example, how can we mitigate police involvement? Because police are expensive. Police have other things to do. And how can we connect with social services for these folks? How can we find another way? We want people to feel safe in our communities, and we want people to be protected who need help. I think that that's the way that I would kind of put it.
Angel. Question?
Maybe just to say what I just heard in a different way.
Sure.
To possibly counter what my colleague proposed. I'm hearing you say that a lot of these folks who are having the most frequent contact with police
Mhm.
are in fact, by some measures, the least safe in our community.
The most vulnerable, yes.
The most
Vulnerable, yes.
But if we're talking about safety, the way that they are not necessarily dangerous people.
Correct. They're not committing crimes, and that's the really important part. That the work that
You look down
these
here,
folks, you can
yeah.
see, right?
This
So
person.
person number 1 was only arrested 16% of the time in this, right? 16%. Huh? It's still a lot, but it's not right over 2 years, right? But what are you finally getting arrested for? And it turns out to be, and we go down to farther on that too.
Just to finish.
Yes, I'm sorry.
That we're talking, right, so what are they being arrested for? Often it's disorderly conduct, or disorder was the highest, in that first
Yeah.
graph
So-
chart was done. That can include a lot of things.
Well, let's have, do you
Yeah.
know what they're arrested for?
Yes,
So let's.
there we go.
Here we go.
Trespass.
Violations of.
Violations of conditional release, which we still have another whole report coming out
That'll
on.
be true.
Yep.
Yeah.
Arrests on warrant, so we don't know what that's covering. But, so we get down to the assaults. Out of all of these contacts, there were only 9 arrests for assaults, right? That's your first violent crime out of all of those contacts. And for some reason, I don't have it in here.
Still a fairly high percentage.
Is this just the one person that we're?
No,
No,
this is the 20,
Out
out
of
of the 20,
Over 2 years.
over 2 years.
Out of the
And-
number of calls, which is like a 2,000.
No, so out of the, this is the 20 people, right? These 20 people who were responsible for
Highest.
highest amount of the disorder folks.
Okay, all right. So,
Yeah.
so Tom had a question. I think Zach had a question.
Kind of a statement or a question, but I do have a question about how you quantified some of the complaints, the number of complaints or whatever.
Yeah,
Was that just the generated complaint number that you went to was
Yeah.
one complaint, but not that there was 5 more complainants below listed in the Valcor screen?
we had we had different data sets from Valcor. We had all people involved in this incident. One of the problems with that data set is that requires a lot of working with, and we did this, but it requires a lot of working with the police to remove the security guard who's calling because he's right. It doesn't say in in Valcor, right? That's what that's why this person is calling. Sometimes it does, sometimes it
One
doesn't.
person could be affecting 5 other people.
Yes, yes. And so we did have that kind of information, and sometimes do these spider webs of, and we'll show you a person who actually crossed multiple jurisdictions during the study period of the things that we were
And-
looking at.
The one other thing I would like to just like share is that the number of dots that are right here, and especially in the police are triaging calls. To say it's not a crime is not necessarily true. I mean, it could be ordinance being violated or a very minor crime that they just can't
Yeah,
deal with.
yeah,
at that
right,
moment,
yeah.
correct?
Right,
Would that be
yes,
fair?
that's also fair to say. Yes, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Quality of life issue.
Quality of life issue. And that's what these disordered calls were. Noise complaints, family fights that didn't rise to the level of domestic violence, disorder, trespass, those sorts of things that that was how we captured it. Yeah.
But if there was more of us and actually able to handle all these interactions correctly, they would be listed as probably.
I can't say that.
Well,
Yeah. That's not what they're telling
I
me.
would say that
Yeah.
a lot of them would. I mean.
Yeah, I mean, I defer to the agencies in the way that they're telling us about their data. And so the agencies have not told us that. And what is interesting though, and what one of the oh, sorry.
I'll let her finish her thought.
Okay.
Okay,
Because mine's gonna be multi-part.
all right, okay. I think one of the things that I it's interesting to have these questions because I think these are much different than the questions that I get when I present these to the public, or to the groups that have been created to help, triage some of these problems, right? And so the commissioner has, there's something called the situation table that are using these data to come forward to help, wrap around services to these folks. One of the things that's not here, because this is the first public one that we've done, one of the things that's not here that has been in other places that we've done, are the folks that are deceased in these data, right? And so in Brattleboro, in St. Johnsbury, there was a woman who was deceased over an overdose. So we were able to go back and look at the contacts that she had before she died, right? Every agency knew that she was gonna overdose, right? And so how do we can use data here to do this. Bennington had 2 people in this top 20 who were deceased. And so that's why we're looking at these data. How do we, in an interdisciplinary way, intersect with these folks, so that I don't have a lot of deceased folks in these data. That's really what we are looking at. And then one more thing, sir, if you don't mind, if I just go down.
I think Tom had a follow-up.
Yeah, just one more.
Yeah.
When you're digging in Valcor, are you looking at a completed case or are you looking at?
They just gave me absolutely everything that was in there.
Okay, so are you looking at what they defined it as when they left and then generalizing it into another group of things? Like, you had a disturbance, an unlawful trespass or whatever, and those all kind of falling into one category or?
Yeah, so you'll see, we gave you a, which Valcor, which agency defined incidents were in that disordered. Yeah, and so every agency has their own agency codes. Valcor allows them to just create stuff, and so they do.
Well, yeah, they add stuff,
Yeah.
but I mean, it comes with its own generic.
Yeah, right. And so, but what we were interested in is how that call comes in, not what the investigation regularly shows, because how that call comes in, what the PSET team is interested in is who else can respond here, right? And how do we prevent people from having those kind of heartbeats that you saw where nobody needs 8 contacts with the police a day. Right? Nobody. And so, but what I do want to show is, so these 20 people, let's go back to the next map. Yeah, so this map, what we also did for each town is to map out, and this gets to what some of your constituents may feel, so we showed you where the top 10 locations were for disorder, but this follows the 20 people throughout the town, right? And so how are they interacting in the spaces in the town? And what does that do? And so these are, we gave people the ability to drill down and see what kind of incidents were happening in these places. And then to show person Y. So here's a person that went between Brattleboro, Springfield, and Bennington within the course of this study period. And you can see sometimes had 4 contacts in a day, or 2 contacts in a day, or a lot of several contacts. Because this person is moving along the border communities, we don't know what's happening in Massachusetts or what's happening in New York or New Hampshire, or where this person was. I can tell you, we did go through Valcor to find out if they were showing up somewhere else, and they weren't. And they weren't in jail because I looked. So one of the things that's of interest to all of us has been what's happening in these blank spaces where they're not showing up in the police system. Where are they? And is that a good thing or is that a bad thing? What's happening with that person, or what happens when they show back up, or what happens when they show up in a new community? So in St. Johnsbury, we had, a couple that was doing in St. Johnsbury. Now they're up here in Barry. And so what happens?
Could they be in a place with no coverage?
No coverage, meaning
No law enforcement coverage?
they could, yes, they could be. They could be stable. They could be
Right.
in another state.
That's-
They could be at lots of places. I have no idea where they are. Yeah. Yeah, well, they're not in jail because I looked. Yeah, we looked. So that was what I wanted to get out of there. So,
Yeah, no, I think that's very helpful. And so
Yeah, go ahead.
want to be recognized by the chair first.
Yeah.
And firstly, I just want to applaud you because I think this is some of the most fascinating testimony we've received, especially on the public safety crisis that we're facing in the state. And I think, data behind all of this, I think is such a critical part in our decision-making process, and that informs the policy recommendations that this committee and our broader colleagues in the House can undertake. So statement, but I do have questions.
yes, thank you.
One of the questions I have is, have you looked at, and again, I think this encapsulation of Brattleboro in this instance, right? One of the questions I have is, how are we seeing the crossover between, this one individual with 100 some odd interactions? Are we seeing crossover? And this is kind of what you're talking about in person Y in other municipalities and jurisdictions. Are we seeing crossover amongst other people in the study? Is that a common trend that you're seeing, that if they're committing something, some kind of, if they're being picked up in Brattleboro, are they also being picked up in other places?
Yeah, so that's not a part of what we did for this.
Okay. But you
It just
could.
so happens that, well, so the police own their own data. And right now, the commissioner is paying us for people who consent to
Sure.
have us look at their data to do this. We have some suggestions that we haven't run by the commissioner, so I'm not going to surprise her here.
Yeah. That's the right.
But yeah, so there are options. What we have been told, so I just happened to look at those 3 jurisdictions and notice this person was in the top 20 in all those 3 jurisdictions. Right. And so that's how we got to person Y. What we do have is this anecdotal evidence from our partners in the police departments who are saying, yeah, that person's moved over to Rutland now. They're not here anymore. Like the cops know where they are. It's a question of showing the data. Yeah.
The interesting thing though was when we were in St. Johnsbury, this couple, and they knew that they were in Barry, but we were like, did you tell people in Barry? What's the communication?
Yeah,
Which I
right.
think is also.
Right. And not just from the police, but from the social service agencies and the community partners, in Project Vision in Rutland and so on, that's really the point of this is to hold some of the community partners accountable.
And selfishly, out of my own interest, have you done any work with Rutland City Police Department? Just so I represent, so I'm sure you have.
The answer is yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, no, by your laugh, I can only imagine what the data unearthed. I mean, I've been having meetings with Rutland PD on
Yeah.
the side, and so.
So the good news is, so way back in the day, when Project Vision started, we wrote the briefing manual
Great.
for that. They then hired an analyst. That was the idea. We would get them up and running. That analyst, moved on a long time ago, and now you've got, what's his name? I'm forgetting his name. You're an analyst in Rutland.
Rowdy?
No.
Oh, no.
He works under Prouty.
His name is Nathan.
That's what it is, Nathan. Okay.
His
Thank
name is
you.
Nathan.
His name is Nathan, the analyst. And so that's that sort of stuff. The former mayor, Chris Loris, used to work for us.
Oh, is that
as
right?
crime
Okay,
research,
yeah,
yes.
Chris.
And so, but in answer to your question, I will tell you this, we do have a federal grant that is starting up soon and Rutland has signed on,
Great.
which is going to be us standardizing the way that crime data is presented. So all the analysts will be joining us And Rutland, like I said, signed on, and we're going to work with people, like, this is how we're going to present data so that you guys as consumers don't have to go through and say, oh, Rutland does it this way. Why does Bennington do it this way? We're going to agree upon, these are the things that we want to present.
That is the goal.
That's the goal.
It's
a lofty goal.
It's a very admirable goal, which
That's
brings me
a
to
goal.
another follow-up question. Early in the presentation, we talked about the codification around the hotel motels and where these incidents are occurring.
Uh-huh.
And you said it could be possible that it's hard to capture where these incidents are happening accurately. I was just curious why that's the case. Is it in line with what you're saying now in terms of just codifying these?
Yeah, so sometimes there are two kind of, there's a lot of catch-all
Yeah,
things. And so sometimes what's showing up, and this is working with the individual police departments to understand how they're coding things.
Sure.
So sometimes it'll show up as an agency or citizen assist. And maybe that's really, if I counted the agency and citizen assists separately, then Bennington would have shown up some of those motel programs, right? Because they're agency citizens assist. There isn't a lot of agreed upon definitions across law enforcement about what is an agency assist, what's a citizen assist, what are we really capturing there? And that's part of the, the work that we're going to be doing with the
Just
crime analysts.
streamline and standardize that.
Yes, or to, or what's a suspicious person that we actually respond to?
Also just want to point out that not a lot of departments have crime
Crime
analysts. So
analysts,
we're not
right.
talking about a lot of people in a lot of departments. And then you're going to have the remaining departments who, the information could be shared with them, but it's going to be harder for them to
analyze the
actually
data. Yeah.
analyze
Sure.
and perhaps make any of the
Right.
recommendations that we come up with.
In terms of the sheer scope of the 190 some odd
Mhm.
interactions, and I think we just want to be really mindful of saying only 9 assaults, because I think a lot of the people in these communities
Sure.
are,
Yes.
and I know that,
Yeah.
I know,
Yeah.
I know your intent
Yeah.
about that, but, obviously in comparison to 190 incidents of
Right.
trespass or whatever it might be, and to Representative Oliver's point is, and Representative Ghostline, is you look at 190 instances, these communities are like, how is this possible that one
Exactly,
person
right.
has all these incidents? So, and I promise I'm concluding short, but so one other question is, have you done any analysis in terms of bringing out the, kind of the miscellaneous, incidents with police interaction where it is violent, where it results in arrests or imprisonment? Have you done any analysis on that in these communities?
Not for this project,
Okay.
because this project
It's just pure
is,
incidents.
yes, it's pure incidents. There's other research that we've done on violence in the communities that I can point you to. And then again, there's that intersectional analysis that AHS is undertaking
Sure.
that will take a long time to do. Yeah.
Understood.
So,
I'd be curious to see that. And then my
Yeah.
final question is, and Representative Oliver brought this up, is in terms of looking at the data that has been provided to you,
Mhm.
and I think, the analysis is only as good as the data that you have.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm just curious, have you seen, and again, I don't have any inside knowledge of this, but I'm just curious of your experience. Have you come across any data that you feel is either misleading or not fully reported, or any anomalous activity from the Attorney General's office?
no,
You
no,
feel like everything has been presented
it's the data from the data. I mean, I can't.
but not selectively provided.
It's raw.
No, it's raw data.
But no,
Yeah.
no. And I'm not saying, so
Yeah.
I get the point that it's raw
Yeah.
data. My question is, do you feel like everything has been accurately reported?
I don't know that I can answer that question. So I'm not auditing whether or
But there's
not.
nothing, my point of view is this, is that you're the subject matter expert.
Yeah.
Like I
Thank you.
no, I mean that as a compliment.
Yeah, I know.
And so I really trust and I appreciate all the analysis that you're providing. But my question is, if that there has been misleading or inaccurate data that has been provided, and I'm not saying that there is, but I am very curious, if you've seen any trends where you're like, this just doesn't make sense. As someone who's working in this data all the time, is the data that's being provided by the Attorney General or other different agencies or departments, you feel like everything's kind of locked in step, like everything makes sense to you is the way that's been presented?
When I see anomalies, and I will give you an anomaly in the data.
Sure.
We did a study a few years ago on looking at failure to appears in the data. And so here's just the way the data works. If you look at the criminal histories and whether somebody had a failure to appear on those criminal histories, that only appears if a warrant was issued. Let me tell you how many times a warrant is not issued,
Right.
right? Because it's just not issued. So when I looked there, we had a very low failure to appear rate of 6%, right? And the highest one was actually Wyndham County. Like they were off the charts for some reason. They were just reporting data differently. So that's what I say.
Yeah.
Is I say there's a process that is here that is making the numbers different. You'll see in our Act 40 report, when we get to bail, we noticed something funny in the data. We went back to our data partners, right? This is how we work. We notice something funny. We go back and say, there's something funny. This is how we're going to handle it because we have to publish, but we want to explore this with you. And it turns out in Addison County, the clerks were entering the information incorrectly. It's now been remedied. They're going to go back and do it. So that's what we see. We don't attach value labels to why we see the anomalies. We just notice that we do and work with our partners to understand the data. And yeah.
I appreciate that. I yield back. Thank you.
Ken and then Tom.
So can we just go back to the screen
And then
with the,
Dots, you want?
yeah.
Yeah,
No, that one right there, the trespassing and all that.
Okay, yep,
the arrest.
Not the arrests, the other ones, the trespass and all this stuff.
yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
okay.
So we've got trespass, we got violations of conditions, we got warrants, we got this disorderly. And then we'll get to the assaults, which jumps down to
Yeah,
9 violations of abuse, 8,
yeah,
right?
yes, correct.
So I'm just gonna go and I'm gonna keep beating this. Because we're dealing with the symptoms. We're not taking care of the problems. This situation right there, the public is living in fear. If somebody is out there on a trespass or a violation of conditions or a warrant or disorderly or assaults, they're living in fear because we as a state are not doing our job. And a lot of that, and this is my opinion, and I really don't care about anybody else's, right? But we have a fear of going and like getting these people the help they need because of, it's like everybody wants to think like me. I just want to be accused of, oh, I want to incarcerate everybody. No, I don't. I want to get them the help that they need to be a viable citizen, hopefully. Yet we can't get the facilities to go and do that to get them the help. That is my frustration. And then on top of that, we're putting many other people's lives in jeopardy by all of this stuff that continues to go on, and it gets worse. And I'm going to jump right down to retail theft as 6.
Yep.
Hell, I have that every day in Berlin.
Right. So what I'm trying to say is that, and right. And so I was here last year talking about retail theft, and there was a proprietress from Brattleboro talking about, and you may remember her. She was speaking about all of the retail theft that she experienced in her life, right? And the frustration that she had about the retail theft bills that you were talking about. And so we know from her testimony, we know from other data that Brattleboro has way more than 6 retail thefts, right? Berlin has way more than 6 retail thefts. These 20 people, though, are only responsible for 6. That means there are other people that are responsible for all of the other retail theft that's happening, right? So that's a different cohort and a different answer, perhaps, than what the PSAT is looking at, right? So that's the importance. That's what I would like people to kind of take away from as communities grapple with how to use these data. There are absolutely people who are committing a lot of retail theft. It's not these 20 people, right? These 20 people are taking up a lot of time, the police department, and that's why they're there. So that's what I want to point out, that there's a lot of domestic violence in Brattleboro. There's a lot of domestic violence across our state. But it's not, that's a different cohort of people and different policy answers.
So when we're going and we're doing this, right? If the police are involved, or if we want to send somebody else out, mental health, whoever, right? We're putting their lives in serious jeopardy, along with already the public. Because we're not getting these people the help they need that are doing these offenses.
I will agree that there's not, that the help that it, right, that's what the PSET team and that's what these community responses are about, is trying to find ways to get the folks there. So this is, honestly, this is at the local level where these, it's not a statewide policy unless the commissioner and the PSET team is going to come forward with statewide policy suggestions. It is just, this is how Brattleboro is going to respond. So since Brattleboro got this data, Brattleboro has hired an analyst to do crime analysis. When I presented this data to their stakeholders with the names of the people involved, with the consent of the police department, with the names, the stakeholders, the people, the schools, the human service agencies, the Groundworks, which is a big social service agency down there, their local mental health, et cetera. They all knew those names. There was silence in the room when they heard those names, right? They were all like, the family court judge was there. Everyone took responsibility for the fact that they knew those names and that they were on people's caseloads. And this is, that it was a community response that has to happen. So, Northfield and Berlin haven't been chosen yet as PSET teams. If you want to make the argument, but then we can do that analysis too. Right.
Yeah, I mean, as Robin was saying, the commissioner, it's part of this larger process that's happening at the Department of Public Safety. Their team engages with the communities and then we're brought in to sort of work with them specifically on this. There's other work that's happening in those communities around the task force and creating the systems to, address what's happening. And as Robin mentioned, a lot of these communities now are standing up this situation, which is a collaborative way to be really bringing resources to the people or situations that they're bringing.
So please don't, I'm not going after you personally.
No, I understand. Yeah.
I'm frustrated
Understand.
about the lack of accountability and what we're doing about it, which starts in this building. And I've been here for 7 years and I've been dealing with this since basically day one. We have all this stuff going on, but yet we continue to not deal with the problem. We know we have the problem, but we're not dealing with it. It's almost like we're enabling it to continue. And that is my utmost frustration in putting so many people's lives in danger, including the people that are on the screen that is doing that. And it's like, it's like we run into roadblock blocks. It's like we are constantly, somebody will throw a roadblock block out there that we're trying to help the most vulnerable, which I cannot pronounce that word to save my life. But it's like, it's so frustrating as a lawmaker in this building.
Thank you for that. Would you like us to move to Act 40 now?
It's not.
Yeah.
We're gonna make sure we have full time for this.
Okay.
We may have to reschedule other witnesses
Okay.
to do that, to warn the other witnesses who are still in the waiting. Before I go to Tom and then to Ian, just real quick one. Those 20 individuals, what percentage of the interactions do they account for? I know
In this case, it was about 5 or 6%. Yeah. In St. Johnsbury, it was 11%.
for the top 20. Okay.
Yeah. The all calls for service, 11%. So it's been around 5 to 11% of calls for service.
Has it been just St. Johnsbury and Brattleboro?
It's been 4, St. Johnsbury, Bennington, Brattleboro, and Springford.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Right, and
Tom and then Ian.
On the same screen, Representative Goslant had you on with the trespass off
Yeah.
that screen. I get some interest, I get some really good feedback from that in my position.
Yeah.
So I work in like the worst possible place in the state for all of this. A couple block radius. And the first 4 things on here, particularly the first 3, trespass, violation, condition to warrant. Those are where all a person is definitely, they are identified.
Yes.
There's a court interaction with the warrants, the violation of conditions, and the trespass is huge because most of the retail thefts that I see now are underreported, grossly
Yeah, yes,
underreported. Like,
yes, yeah, we saw that last year. Yeah, yeah.
so you're getting a few, but I look at the trespassers and I say that could be it, because most of these folks have trespasses against retail businesses.
Yes.
Yeah, and Brattleboro was also a very specific location that was not retail theft. So yeah, it was I'm not gonna name the location, but in a public meeting,
Okay.
but we talked
Yeah.
about it. Yeah.
But everything else down below is stuff that sort of can be resolved in ways without a mandated court
Yeah.
interaction. It's handled on the street.
Yeah.
It kind of goes away, miscellaneous public service. And then on to the next thing, boom, 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 boom.
Mhm.
If there was a way to quantify or put some sort of score on all the individuals in a certain percentage of the first 3 or 4 things right here, you'd have a really good list. Not that that's the right way to handle it.
Good list of what, I'm sorry.
Of suspects that are you could tell who literally is the top tier of violators in a district, you know?
I mean, I think
I'm not
that,
saying it would be 100% accurate, but it would give you a really good idea and maybe what tracks they would need to get involved in.
I think that's part of what we're trying to do in the
Yeah.
communities is help them understand who they can focus on from a wraparound perspective, right? And I think that's what you're trying to say.
Yeah, the first 2 or 3
Yeah.
people, the real big ones are easy to identify,
Yeah.
but there's a lot of others that are
Yeah.
on the fringes.
Right.
What we have told communities is that, to work on using the data, that if a person is having 3 or more contacts a week, right, into a 2-week period, or they're having 5 contacts in a day, those are the people you bring to your task force, to your situation table and say, right. And one of the things right, because that's what this is showing is that there's a lot of contact with the police. And so if there are other wraparound services, like can you get and one thing about the police data, and I should say also a whole other topic, but we're not going to get today. This doesn't include any juveniles, right? And so, but if the police aren't bound by the same confidentiality rules that say EMS are, right? So they can come and say, this is public data. I had 6 contacts with Robin this week. I think something's happening. And then other people who know of my case can reach out, right? Because maybe I haven't shown up to, my counselor or my substance use coordinator or somebody, but they're in the room, right? In these task force, in the situation table, they're in the room. They now know that I have issues. And so now somebody can make that call. They don't have to wait for me to show up or, God forbid, die.
I really think those top 4 offenses are like the giant indicator. Obviously, you look at the
Mhm.
numbers.
Yeah.
Disorderly conduct and trespassers, they're tied to one
Yeah.
and the same because they're making a scene of something in a store. So the next thing you know, the trespass or they stole or larcenies and assaults, not so much because they fight all the time and they don't report.
Yeah.
um,
Okay, thank you.
you good? Ian and then Angela.
So thank you very much for
Yeah.
your presentation. And I know you have loads to go on. And I just, before you moved on from Brattleboro, as the Brattleboro rep, I just wanted to say that I'm even gonna make a statement, which I try to just ask questions of the witnesses. But, what we saw in the committee, I feel like is exactly what we saw when this
Yes.
data was presented
Yeah.
at the select board meeting. Like it had like a big splash and everyone was like pretty shocked. But then at the same time, and this is kind of gets to my question, if you had taken a blank map of Brattleboro
Mhm.
and then asked me, okay, take a pin and put a pin in every one of the hotspots that
Yeah.
I would have probably gotten every
Single one, right? Yeah.
And so it kind of gets to this question of like, but at the same time, some of this data was really shocking. And now Brattleboro, and I'm sure I have at least one constituent who's watching, so she'll let me know if she agrees with what I'm going to say. Brattleboro is really struggling to
Yeah.
figure out what the hell to do with this.
Yes.
Now that you've given it to us. And I'm kind of curious to your thoughts about kind of like the next steps for communities. And I think what you spoke to about getting all of the service providers in a room and
Mhm.
making them see where basically there's gaps and
Yeah.
gaps that they've created, right?
Yeah.
That's really helpful, and I'm glad that that's happened, and I didn't know that.
Yeah,
But like, that's only like one step.
yeah.
And right now, like, my community is just like all
So,
over
but
the
you
place
guys
trying to
have
figure it out.
participated in the situation table, so
Okay.
so you are doing
They are
that.
being trained.
Yeah, are they
There's
trained?
also
Yeah.
the one Brattleboro
Yeah.
collaborative that was brought together. You still have, I understand that the police are, if they have not, are starting to have meetings with subsets of people to go over sort of like the
These are the numbers,
these are
yeah.
the contacts of the
Yeah.
people, and so it does take a little while to get these things off the ground. The commissioner, who's gone now, and the state, have paid for this situation table training to occur, but it just occurred.
Yeah.
All right, and so I think that needs to get up off of the ground and start moving, and that hopefully will be something that can be really organizing and helpful in all the communities that are doing the situation.
Is there, do you have communities that are further along?
You're all in the same
You're all-
spot.
yeah.
You're
So
all-
we don't really know, okay.
Yeah, you're.
Yeah, so it's-
Yeah.
Like, look to.
The situation table is something that's happened in other states.
Yeah,
And so there is information about that and its success and how it's worked in
and
other
how it's worked,
states.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so that's something that we can.
And it aims to kind of
Yeah.
break down that barrier of, I can't tell you anything because of HIPAA,
Yeah.
right? And so sometimes that's true, sometimes that's just, I don't.
And they are trying to actually work on and
Getting
getting
releases,
releases from
right, yeah.
the people who are, they're being brought into this situation so
Yeah.
that people can share more.
More information, yeah.
Sometimes it is just one directional, as
Yeah.
Robin said,
Yeah,
the law enforcement agency can share, it's because it's not protected.
yeah. And so will you guys stay engaged with the roundtable and as it's? moving?
We are not part of the situation
Or
table
situation.
Yeah.
process, no. I
Okay.
mean, there are other consultants that came in, trained the communities, I think are providing support to the communities. It's meant to be like, come in and train and then,
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
and then leave. Our role, PSET is a multi sort of group. We do this data piece. There's other consultants who are going in and working with the community members. In Brattleboro, Springfield, and Bennington, it was Jim Baker. Some of you know who he is. Garnett Consulting is taking over there in St. John Jerry. And so we're all sort of working
Yeah,
together, but on very specific
Yeah.
pieces.
Could you remind me what piece set?
Public safety
enhancement
enhancement
team,
team.
yeah.
And really the commissioner who's left is
So just so folks know, I ran and talked to Commissioner Morrison. So we're gonna have her in to talk about, she can talk about this, and I'll ask you guys if you have other people, probably Baker will bring in as well. But also just, I know that the Department of Public Safety are using data in different.
Yes.
They have a different dashboard.
Yes,
Yeah.
so we will have them in. Is there somebody else? I mean, are there particular law enforcement folks that you guys would recommend as far as how this data is being used? Or what would Baker be the right person?
well, I think that he could reach out to, I think hearing from the law enforcement and how those communities are working together, Springfield and Bennington and Brattleboro are the farthest along of these groups. And so, who the town decides to send, because it is a coalition, so when we have these summits, Bennington, the police should come, and then
Town manager,
town
so
manager,
John Potter
yeah,
and
John
Brattleboro
Brattleboro, the
is-
town manager
yeah.
can talk about how this
Yeah.
process has worked for them. And so, yeah, we can certainly brainstorm with you of people that we would say that you could reach out to.
Yeah, and like I said, the commissioner is really at DPS, it's
Yeah.
sort of the unifying, and so they're the ones who are, and it's a collaboration with the agency of human services
Yeah.
too, but commissioners.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
So, and before, just so folks know, and because I know I have Kim McManus, I think is still on, I can't tell with that, but that's fine. Is that we'll probably, I know that Ian Sullivan has done a lot of data work in Rutland as well to understand really the people who are the frequent flyers who come into the court.
Mhm.
What's
Yeah.
the breakdown of the number of people who have 5 or more
Yeah, yeah.
dockets. So we'll probably, just to get a full kind of picture, or
Yeah.
maybe it's not a full picture, we're gonna probably be doing.
Yeah.
Well, I think what you'll see, and what, we're trying to, we're working on this, and I think some of your other partners are too, is like trying to take these disparate data sets.
Yeah.
And bring them together, which is a
Right.
really good statement to ask for you, then
Yeah.
just tell you.
Right, yeah. But I did want to show you this. I actually, I should have calculated that it would have generated a lot of conversation.
I knew these things.
Yes. What I wanted to show you is that these are things I normally don't talk about when you ask me to come. And that there is this whole group of folks that aren't coming into the system, but are in the police system, right? That aren't, so they're not making it to here. These aren't the same people that Ian is tracking for 5 or more, right?
But it sounds like they maybe are, but they also have 180 other incidents plus the 6 or 7 incidents.
No, it's different. It's different. These are different cohorts of people. Yeah. And I have people, I see names, right, in the data that I get from folks. And I have people that I follow, for lack of a better term, like, oh, nothing worked for this person. They're still here. They're still here in my data set.
But just let me, I want to make sure I understood that, because I thought those 20, like that one person who had 198, he or she did have a certain number.
They did.
They did have a certain number of arrests,
Right.
but that's not the person, right? So they had 16% of that 151, I think, were arrested. There are people on that 20 that were never arrested.
Right, okay.
Right. So these are a different cohort of people than the people who have been arrested several times, have multiple open cases
Right.
during a few month period, right? And we'll show you some of those folks. These are just different folks.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, now I do want to ask my.
Okay, yeah, go ahead, Angela, answer your
If
question
you
before we go to Act 40.
Yes, if you
I'll
could
just do a brief-
define for us your understanding,
Yeah.
and maybe there's an actual definition, but I haven't seen it yet, of contact with the police. When you're talking about one person having 200 contacts.
So they were involved in an incident. So the way it works in Valcor is there's incidents, right? So we talk about incidents. There's an incident. When I look at that incident and this person, then there's a bunch of names that are associated with that incident. So if I'm a victim, I'm associated with that incident. If I'm the perpetrator, I'm associated with that incident. I took out witnesses, for the most part, because that's not really what I was tracking. So in those 151, incidents, the person could be a person of interest. They could be a victim, right? Because there's just a fine line sometimes, right? On some things. And so that's what I mean, that there was an incident opened and that the police identified this person as as one of the people involved. And so that's what I was counting.
Okay, so that would not count times that, say, a police officer sees this person that is known to them on the street or something and just approaches them to say like, hey, how's it going
Correct.
today? Oh, right.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Tom has a question for you.
I was gonna say the best of the best and the worst of the worst. I mean, make a description. Is there any information on how many of these people end up dead?
Well, yeah, so,
Yeah.
yes.
Houses
Yeah.
freezing.
Yes. Yeah, so, yes. Sometimes the police department tells me they're dead, right? Or if I look, just do a cursory search that, I can find a news article or something about the person's demise. When I do research with criminal histories, that tells me whether a person is deceased. Like that's the bulk. It's like, so if I were to pull people's rap sheets, it tells me whether they're deceased. And I usually remove those folks from analysis because they're gone. And I don't know when they passed, so it affects my studies. But I can tell you that when I do these studies and I pull the rap sheets, that it's usually around 10% of the cohort has passed. And it's not surprising.
Is that a high number?
It is, yeah.
Figured it was.
Yeah, it is. When you're just, it's a high number given the age distribution of folks that are in my studies, but it's not a high number when you consider, when you look at the Department of Corrections and the health responses that they have to, right, the healthcare needs of folks when they're coming into the system is vast. And so there's the overdose issues, but then there's also the poor health issues that compound things. Yeah, so, they're not getting healthcare till they get to prison, which is not
Right, so they've got all these unattended things.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden now, somebody has to pay attention
Yes.
to the department.
All the more.
yes.
Yeah,
makes Representative Goldslant's point even more important that gotta get the people off the street.
We gotta get them help,
Gotta
yeah.
get them help.
Help, yeah,
Gotta get
yeah.
them.
One way or the other.
Well, yeah, I mean,
Not passionate anymore not to get people off the street.
that's a politics decision.
Yeah. Take a breath and I'll
Take a
start,
breath,
I'll
yes.
do this.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll start here. Okay. All right.
And take your time. I really want to dig into.
Okay, yeah.
Okay.
There's a lot to dig into.
There's a
here.
lot to dig
All right.
into. Yeah.
So, we're very excited about this. Act 40 Criminal Justice Investment Trends Report, as we mentioned earlier, passed in 2023. This is directly from our website. So we prepared this report. I mean, I did send a PDF to you all with a bunch of links. The best way for you to interact with this report is to go to our website and go to the Research Roundup page and then click on the Act 40 report. And it'll bring you to the screen I'm showing here. So in Act 40, a lot of times it will get asked to do a study or we'll write our own study and decide, how we want to approach the data. Act 40 was very specific, actually. It's one of the few times it's been told to us, we want you to report on these data. And I listed what most of them were there. It was very intentional in terms of what was supposed to be included. So it's possible you'll have questions about things that you thought might be here, but we were responding to what the report was asking us to do. As I mentioned earlier, the report required us to actually gather a lot of information from a bunch of different agencies. I'm not going to read through here. You can see it's a long list. I will point out, I think it's important and important also in light of the testimony we heard earlier, getting data extracts, because these data extracts are identifiable data. That's what the Crime Research Group usually receives. And so it requires a little bit more work because you do have to go through contracts or MOUs. You have to be very specific. And there's a way of exchanging the data. And it takes a while. In fact, in this case, it took us almost a year to get the information we needed from the judiciary, not through anyone's fault. It just can take that long. For instance, the bail data that is in this report, we received only like a month before the report was due. We're very excited that we have that. We just know that we've got a lot more. Findings we'll kind of get into a little bit later. So each report has its own section. And so each one of these links will take you to a section of the report. We can go through each one by one, or if the chair, if you have a specific.
No, I think you should go through them.
Okay, let's start with clearance.
We're going to start with.
We're going to start at the beginning.
So we're going to go off
know where we are. Yeah, it's just like, know where we are. All right, so now we're on, incidents and offenses. So this data is coming from a system called, it's coming from Valcor and Spillman, but it goes through a process for the National Incident-Based Reporting System. And I know that you heard some testimony from my colleague at the Defender General who said you can't trust NIBRs, nobody does NIBRs. Respectfully, he's wrong. And this is why. What he was confusing is that the nationally, so there used to be two reporting systems, NIBRs and the summary reporting system. Most states were still on the summary reporting system, and they were ordered to switch to NIBRs by the FBI in around 2020. And that's been a problem for a lot of jurisdictions to do. There's also something called NIBRs estimates, and those were a little off around October, November. We don't use NIBRs estimates. Vermont has been NIBRs compliant since 1993. Everything goes through an audit process. It gets kicked back from the FBI if it's inconsistent. These are the data that researchers actually use across the country to look at crime trends and information. It is a great data set. It has information on arrests and weapons used, weapons that the arrestee may have on their person, the victim to offender relationship. Did it happen? Did the offense happen in a parking lot or in a college or at home? All sorts of wealth of information. And so we We continue to use it. There is a NIBRS auditor that you can bring in if you want to hear from them. Jeff at VCIC controls the NIBRS project. But we have been a member, we have been fully compliant since 1993. And so these data you can download the raw data. People can download the raw data themselves. And we are always happy to share our code on how we merge data across things. We looked at, you asked us to look at arrests, clearance, and just crime trends in general. One thing about NIBRS, though, is that NIBRS, because it's a national project, doesn't use Vermont statutes names, right? So an assault here covers simple assaults and domestic violence. We have to dig down to a different spot to get to the number of domestic violence, right?
That's in our statute, or that's the way the national?
That's the way that the national, right, the national crime data works.
So the national crime data just combines what we have as two separate statutes.
It's
assault.
Right. They combine it as assault, but then there's a separate section of the crime data where I know the victim to offender relationship. And that's where I can get at whether it was intimate partner violence or child abuse or something like that. So there is a way to answer those questions, just not with the name of the crime, right?
You'll see below sort of how
Yeah.
they do it. Yeah.
And so, there is just a category for drug crime. They don't break it out by the type of drug or whether it was sales, possession, or anything like that. There's another part of the data that I can look at and that tells me what drugs were involved, but the name of the offense is just drug offenses, right? So there's ways around to get to some very specific questions. This is the general, crimes against people, crimes against
So drop down.
property or society. So we created these interactive reports for you. Representative Rachelson isn't here right now, but I want to, for the record, say that I know that she prints out my stuff and reads it. But I can't make the interactive stuff printable. So we're still working on a way to do that.
I printed it all off.
Oh, you did?
As well.
I mean,
Okay.
You can print it off.
You can print it off, you just can't interact with it. And what we wanted to do is to give you the ability to interact with the data. And so that you guys can figure out, you can answer your own questions and see what it brings to you so that I'm not just telling you what the data says, you can interact with it and see the trends for yourself. The crime rates are, when you look at the crime categories, they're generally pretty stable. You'll see some differences in the property.
Yeah. It was property.
Yes, right. So this, not a shocker, right? What's going up? Because you did a whole thing on it, right?
Larceny and thefts.
Larceny and thefts, right? And so that's all your retail thefts in that category. And so your clearance rates, this is whether or not an incident was cleared by arrest. So I don't know. Let me rephrase that. You asked for clearance rates. So this is just a count of how many crimes were cleared by arrest. What it doesn't say, what that calculation doesn't say, it doesn't say what the person was arrested for. All right. I have that somewhere else. That's not the question you asked. And so I want to be really clear about the question you guys asked was clearance rates. How many incidents were cleared by arrest? And so
What do you mean by cleared by arrest? I want to make sure I understand.
that somebody was arrested for the crime. Somebody was
So like
arrested.
the incident is like, now the incident has been resolved or
Yes.
whatever. It's a different way of saying it, cleared.
Cleared, yeah. So it's cleared by arrest. It can be not solved, right? So when I was presenting last year on retail theft, a lot of those weren't cleared by arrest. There was nobody ever arrested for those, right?
So it doesn't say whether they were.
Not adjudicated.
Not adjudicated.
Just arrested.
Yeah, just arrested, right? Somebody was arrested for this incident. And so how you use this data, if you want to know how many rape cases were cleared by arrest, right? This is what you're asking. This is how you use that data. And so that you can see how we're doing in those cases. Yes, we are clearing them for arrest. The next question is, what were they arrested for? And here's where NIBRS data gets a little different. When we look at arrests, like what was the person arrested for, they only list the most serious offense. They don't list all the other offenses the person was arrested for. So now in the case of rape, we would know, right? Because the only one more serious is homicide. And but when we're looking at the larcenies, when we're looking at some of these other things, there's not a real, in NIBR's data, there's not a real clear ranking. In data that we have here in the state, we have lots of rankings of stuff and we can do that, but
So does it distinguish between misdemeanor and felony
No.
larceny?
no, NIBR's data does not do that.
You have other ways to get at that.
We get at it, yes. So we can get at it from the court data, right? Because you guys are making the determination, somebody's making the determination. Somebody could query Valcor and Spillman for, how many arrests were made or how many, reports for larceny over. It's a queryable. Yes. Yeah. So this allows you, again, to be all interactive and figure out what it is that you want to look at for the incident years that we gave you and the types of crimes that you're looking at.
Can I ask you another question about larceny? Are you able to tell if a firearm was stolen?
Yes.
Is that in data, or how is that determined?
It's in a separate table of the NIBR's data. So I know what property was stolen. They do put in an offense. So there's another data set that I get. I get an extract every 6 months from Valcor. So that has all of our stuff, right? All of our language, all of our citations. And that data I would use to, say whether a handgun was stolen, reported stolen. I will say, having looked at that data, people have some creative numbers on values of things. I don't know how else to put it.
Because they have to say what they.
Right, so they have to say the cost, and so a firearm could be, somebody could value that at $200, or somebody could value the firearm at much more than that, right? And so there's some creative numbers in there. But yes, I know what was stolen.
So can I make a request for data now? Well, I'm thinking.
I got my pen right here, yeah.
Would be like a breakdown of how many incidences of stolen firearms, and if it's possible to tell what would be a misdemeanor and felony.
Okay.
That'd be very helpful for page 19.
Okay.
As a fill.
Yeah.
Can I add something to that?
Well, we knew this part was coming.
I don't-
Data request. Yeah.
I don't get that.
No.
No, there's the, let me check. I don't think I get whether the property was, I may in NIBR's. I think that may actually be in NIBR's field. Yeah, there's also a very interesting website that I worked on many years ago before I ever came to Vermont, that actually tracks, it's called the time to crime. So when firearms are stolen and when they appear in a crime. And so I can send you a link to that too. It's not just for Vermont, it's nationwide. And so that was done with, years ago.
Okay, so do we want to,
Yes.
what do we need to say?
So
about
let's have
this?
arrest types. All right, so you hear a lot in Vermont about arrest types. NIBR's captures different arrest types, and sometimes they line up for what the police look at, and sometimes they don't. So we have I'm going to arrest you, take you down to the station, fingerprint you, and then I'm going to release you on a citation. That happens a lot here in Vermont, right? And the FBI does not consider that a citation arrest. We consider it a citation arrest. And so one of the problems with these data is, are the police entering in what they would consider to be a citation, or are they entering in the FBI definition? And you can go through with the NIBR's auditors in each department about what they do. Yes, sorry.
Can you give the two definitions?
Yes. So there's arrested. So the FBI considers you arrested if I'm brought to the station, if I'm transported somewhere, if I'm brought to the station, right? The FBI considers citation on a warrant is if you just hand me one on this, if you just hand me a citation on the street, right? So you have seen me commit the crime and you're handing me the citation, or you have probable cause, whatever our Rule 3, Vermont Criminal Rule 3, right? That standard, you're going to hand me the citation. That's what the FBI considers a citation. They consider arrest on a warrant when there's an open case and an actual bench warrant to arrest me. Those are the FBI definitions.
How do ours, or you're about to tell us how ours are different?
Well, so there's the language, right? What language do we use? And I think a lot of people would say that a citation is, even if you pull me over for DUI and you fingerprint me, you're going to give me a citation to appear. You're not holding me for bail, right? Or you're not. So that's really what where the kind of language comes in. And so we don't. There is an audit process, but there's a lot of fields that NIBR's audit, like, right, that NIBR's auditors go through. And so I'm just pointing out that in the past, when we've looked at this, we have been told that this is not an accurate, right? The people are using citations in the Vermont sense and not in the FBI sense. Right, I don't know if I'm explaining it well.
It's an arrest to us, a citation's an arrest.
Right.
Right.
But if Rule 3 doesn't apply, then they don't go to jail.
Then they don't go to, yeah. So we just are really, right,
We count citations as an arrest.
we do. Yes, we do. Well, yes, right, it is the beginning of your, right, once it's that's, and remember the sequential intercept model from years ago? Right, it's a step in the process. That arrest is going to maybe get you a charge files, right? Or it allows you to go to diversion, or it allows you to do this. And whether it's a citation or we physically are transporting you, that's.
Let's get you too, because we're supposed to transport everybody in fingerprint.
Right, but
But not go to jail.
yeah, but we also know that doesn't always happen, right? Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. But here's where you want to be. Here's what you want to look at. So we actually did this for another study. We were looking at the differences on what effect did COVID have actually on arrest processes in the state. And you'll see that, if we do here, right? So here's COVID. That the cited is going up a little bit, but it's pretty much the same for crimes against people. What is changing right here is we're switching is the cited versus, arrested versus warrant. So that during COVID, we had an increase of warrants, which we would expect as people, especially during those, if you go back to those traumatic early days of shutdowns and people responding to crimes and so on and so forth. If you go do crimes against society. Right, and you see the same kind of stuff here. There we go. Except that you're seeing that cited after 2020 kind of takes off, right? That the crimes against society, they're being recorded as citations and not as being custodially arrested or arrested on a warrant, although that is going up as well too. So there are consequences to the people who are being arrested, right? Depending on the type of arrest and how much interaction they're having with the system. And so that's really what you want to look at here is, are there disparities in the type of contact that people are having? And what are the consequences of that type of contact? So, it is, much different to hand me a citation and show up, someday with no bail attached versus having bail, right? And so these types of arrests could impact that. And then if you want to go down.
So let me follow up on
Yeah.
what you just said.
Yeah.
I'll make sure I have that clear. So the number of citations as opposed to custodial
Yeah.
arrests has gone up. The number of
Yes.
citations.
Yes.
So
And that,
if you go to our report, sorry.
no, go ahead. Yeah. Go ahead.
The research roundup, if you go to that page, there's a brand new report there. Robin said citations versus arrests. So you'll be able to
Yeah.
see.
Because I think one of the things to note, if I'm remembering our law correctly on bail, is that if somebody is cited into court, bail can't be imposed. Right? Am I remembering that right?
Yeah.
That's what I hear.
Unless there's two violations.
What's that?
Unless there's two violations. If they're cited, if somebody's arrested, you don't need a citation.
Wait, if somebody's taken into custody,
Yeah, if somebody is arrested,
as opposed to just giving a citation and show up
Smart.
months. And it's when the citation that I'm talking about is going up. And those individuals can't be held
that's the
on.
difference. Yeah, they're not being held, they're not being put in jail for whatever reason. And that all really amplified right around the beginning of COVID.
All right, thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Nope. Excuse me. And so we did do, some analyses here about whether, how how people were arrested by race category. And what you will see is that, still there's a preference for citations. And that as you go down, but Black people, let me just go back up for a second.
Yeah.
Black people were more likely than all other races to be arrested on a warrant. And Black individuals who were arrested were less likely to receive a citation compared to other race groups. So that's your disparity. We're not making any comments about what's causing that or why, but we're highlighting that this is where you need to start looking on that issue. And we gave you, so that you can see the race categories and type of citations or type of arrest. One thing I want to point out is, so once you get onto one of our websites, you can click down here at the bottom and get to the other ones. And that we are always putting this version history if I change something substantive,
Okay.
right? So this is what I changed on 113. The report is updated to include information about types of arrests. So that you'll know what I did.
It's another beauty of having an actually live report instead of sending you a
Yes.
PDF that can't be up.
I did
Yeah.
apologize that it's
Yeah,
not a
yeah.
PDF. I know you print out my stuff. And
So we're not gonna have time to go through every one of them, but
No,
I'd
we're not.
like to go through the bail.
Okay, that's
the
where
one
we're gonna go.
That's
That's
where
great.
we're gonna go. So we're gonna click on
And I
that.
have to ask before I forget this question,
No.
I think I already remember the answer, that you're not funded to carry this on.
So yeah, I'll talk to you a little bit about this, right? So we did receive, it says right here, a grant from the Bureau of Justice Statistics to do this work. And essentially, after completing these reports, we've expended most of that money. We've got a little bit left we can do. So no, we are not funded to continue. I know there's a third report. We are, it's possible that we can continue this and get subsequent funding from the Bureau of Justice Statistics. The RFP that we usually respond to has not come out yet. We have no idea when it's actually going to come out. So the funding for that wouldn't even begin until sometime next year. So there's a big gap in terms of us being able to work on this
Yeah.
at this time.
Has there been a request, like through DPS
Well,
because you contract with?
we have a contract, yes, to do specific work at SAC. And we've communicated to the commissioner that our SAC grant has remained the same for 10 years and that we would like to see an increase in that amount of money just to support, quite honestly, a lot of the other work we do. For instance, last year when we came and testified on the women's issues and on retail theft, that was all supported by the SAC grant. We don't have any other resource to support that work. And so if there's more of these types of requests coming in, there really isn't any funding to pay for it. The Bureau of Justice Statistics has very specific requirements in terms of what they're going to pay for and not pay for. This particular report fit in their requirements, and it still does.
But will it fit in a discretionary? So there's
Discretion,
a
that's the other
discretionary.
point.
So there's two pots that this Bureau of Justice Statistics money comes from. One is required by statute. And so they have to find that statute if they want to get rid of it. But what that statute says is that a certain percentage of BJS's budget has to go to the state statistical analysis centers and to fund the criminal history improvement project.
Right.
And the criminal history improvement project, we get some funds from that currently to do an audit of our criminal histories. Are they accurate? We do know, what we knew last year is that the amount of money in the budget keeps shrinking and shrinking and shrinking. And so BJS is going to be releasing less and less in normal times.
Right. So I guess I may have two overall questions before we go into the bail.
Yeah.
Is I want to really make sure I understand which, because there's a lot of data here.
Yeah.
What is the critical data that will allow us to understand where the trends are? Because this is historical now. It's different,
Right.
23 on back. so that we can be measuring those various things that we do out of this committee to see if any of them are working. Because I know we do have statistics ongoing from the court as far as clearance rate
Yeah.
and time to disposition, but that's not telling us certain details that obviously would be good for us to continue with. So I guess there wasn't a question.
Yeah, but something we can think about. I mean, I think that requires more thought on our part.
And I think it requires, I mean, I know we're not gonna get to the whole report today, but it requires you all to actually read the reports too and sort of say like what, and I know you have, I'm not saying you haven't, but to think about, okay, we really wanna make sure that we have this, who's responsible for bringing this data to
Right,
us?
and so, some of these are not as, not so much this committee, the returns to incarceration from
Right.
community supervision, community-based, well, the restorative justice.
Restorative
Restorative
justice,
justice,
piece,
yeah.
yes,
Additional housing, I mean, that's important, but.
right, but not of your jurisdiction, yeah.
Or work, so there's a few, and we just need to dig and really look at these, because if they're of value for us to measure our progress or lack thereof, we should somehow figure out how to continue to gather this data. But back over to you.
Okay.
Bill.
All
Yeah,
right,
yeah. Okay,
All
so
right.
yeah, and we're happy to have those conversations.
Yes.
Okay, so yes, we know that you've heard a lot of testimony on bail. I think has Ben come in to give you his bail overview in the past?
Yes.
Yeah.
So we
So
used his work.
we used some of his work to
Yeah.
give you the introduction to bail.
Yeah. We appreciate it,
Yeah, yeah. And
So this came from two data sources. And so one of the things that's difficult about capturing bail information is that bail changes over time. Bail statuses change over time. So which time am I looking at? And I am looking at two different times in this report. So I just want to be clear. When I look at the pretrial status, this comes from the database that I normally testify on, which is the court adjudication database. So when the case was disposed, when it was over, this was the pretrial status of the person. And so this is the, right. So these are the types of pretrial release status that we have in the data. And then I just looked at, this is just how it was recorded at the end. So what we have to do with the judiciary is kind of go back and see how does the status change over the life cycle. What the state's attorneys have told us is if you go down that, go down to the actual table.
oh, just this table.
Yeah, just this
Oh,
table, yeah. This cite and release warrant where it's all zeros. For the most part, what the state's attorneys told us is that's usually the first one. That's usually your first pretrial release status. And then if you fail to appear, you'll get the release on conditions or release on own recognizance. So that's why that's missing, is that I'm capturing it at the wrong time to get that date.
But isn't that the cite and release is where we say you can't impose bail? Isn't that?
This is the pretrial status, though. This isn't the
Yeah.
number. This is just the status, right? We don't propose bail on own recognizance either.
Tom, go ahead, Tom.
I'm just confused the way it's titled,
Yeah.
cite and release warrant. Those are two totally different things.
I think this was from Ben's definition.
So cite and release, there is no bail. If there's a warrant, there's bail or condition.
Yeah, I would defer to the state's attorneys. This is their language.
But
No bail, not necessarily bail versus.
on a warrant,
You just
If
need to
you're
be
wanted-
brought before the court.
you're
Yeah.
wanted by the court, you're gonna hit on NCIC if I run you and I take you somewhere.
But
There's bail or a condition.
Yeah, or a
There
condition.
can be bail.
There can be bail, yeah.
Usually
Yeah.
bail.
I think
Yeah.
there probably is usually bail,
I
but
think
not necessarily
The
always.
point is that we were
Yeah,
We were
Yeah.
asking the judiciary for a brand new data set. No,
No.
this is not their.
No.
Okay,
This is-
never mind.
This is not.
Either way, it's custodial.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
custodial.
Yeah, this
Oh,
this is from the adjudication database. So this is the last bail condition imposed, the type of, so this is one of the problems with the language, right? We're using I like to use for here, the pretrial release status. This is it had nothing to do with the amount of money or whether money was attached. This is just a pretrial release status. And some people are released on their own recognizance, some people are released on conditions, some people are held without bail. And sometimes it's missing. And so those are the ones that we have, yes. Yeah.
Let me in.
But one is during court involvement and one's before.
Right,
So-
this is during court involvement.
Okay.
This is
They
during
have already
court.
been arraigned.
Yes, this is actually what this is the
Alright.
status when their case is done.
So this is the point at which they likely have the least amount of bail.
Or they
Typical.
have 5 failure to appears on this case, and when they got disposed, they were on, higher conditions or something like
Right.
that.
Yeah,
So, I don't mean to interrupt, but my question sort of
fine. Yeah,
relates
yeah,
to, so your point is, when you get cited, you'll have bail. Sometimes when you go to court, you might not have any bail.
Correct.
Yeah. So one comment, really appreciate the explanation of the different types of bonds. Every single time I have to go in and.
I think that's been, yeah,
That's been-
that's been.
thanks, Ben.
So
Yeah.
appreciate, I'm probably going to copy and paste this and bring it with me to court, because every single time I go in there, I'm like, what's an unsecured bond? What's a secured bond? So that's very helpful. My question is, so how does this data set capture when you have a weight of the evidence hearing change?
So it doesn't,
Yeah.
right? So it's that's what we have to get at, right? This is a point in time, and this is the time that's right. This is just the status.
And your point of time, you're taking is the
And
decision.
is right at the end, the end
of the
for
case.
this chart only. Okay,
Yeah.
we're gonna get more
for
confusing for this chart only.
Okay.
This is the end. Yes. And what we'll work with the judiciary is really what we have to do. So coming up with these research questions, how does the condition change over time? Let's say that's a research question we want to ask. Then we'll go back to the judiciary and say, can we pull this report now?
Yeah.
Right? Is this something that we can do? And so that's, if I had a lot of funding, that's what I would do next, is say, all right, I think that's really the question that people have. And then again, this is only going into the judiciary data. Bail data is really,
I mean, we
Scattered.
have it
yeah,
on the bottom here,
Yeah.
and I don't know if you want us to just.
Yeah.
Right from there.
we'll go to the bail amounts,
Bail
yeah.
amounts, yeah.
So this data is the first bail amount. They are able to give me bail amounts over time, and I have that. What I didn't have was time to analyze it in a way that, right, because I got data the month before this was due. And so I can now look at the bail amount over time. But what we did here for just simplicity is look at the bail the first time, the first time it was imposed in the case.
Is that cite or arraignment?
This is the whatever the first date was in the judiciary data that they imposed the bail,
it could be either.
Could be,
Video.
Yeah.
Oh, man. Interesting.
right? But here's right, so you can,
Before you,
Yeah.
when you say, could it be at site or arraignment? Can you explain what?
That's an arraignment date.
So when someone gets picked up, right, and I'm not trying to testify.
No, I'm asking to understand.
So when you get picked up, maybe you're held on $200 bail because that's the cap.
Right,
So that might be being captured, but then you're held, you can't pay the $200. Then maybe you get a great defense attorney who comes in at arraignment and says, Your Honor, it's ridiculous to charge $200 or ask for $200 bail. Like there's, blah, 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 look at the conditions, blah, blah, blah. There's a, whole analysis. They drop the bail. Now there's no bail. They have conditions of release. They go. So now they're living without any bail at all. And this data maybe captures that first site bail.
Good,
But
yes.
other way around, now they could go at a site, no bail.
Arraignment.
They show up.
Arraignment.
Yeah, they show up at court. Now the state's attorney has more information and they actually want bail.
okay.
That's the other time when they could get it.
The other thing that can happen.
Thank you. That's
Yeah.
helpful.
The other thing can happen in the first scenario.
Yep.
Is that they can go to a correctional facility on that bail,
Yep.
right? And and then have bail posted. And that bail may not ever appear in any one of these databases. The Department of Corrections might,
No, it doesn't appear.
it doesn't appear, right?
How's that?
Wait, say that again?
When sometimes this is the issue we were talking about, right? So it's like an overnight bail, they go to the correctional facility and then they're released and then they bring themselves to court.
To court, right.
Sometimes that bail is not, if the bail isn't reimposed, sometimes
be
it
in the
doesn't
system.
make it.
Oh, there's a thing called overnight bail?
Well,
This is my thing. Stab at it.
There,
I let Ian,
there's also one other scenario that I'm wondering if this is captured in the data, which is that the bail that is cited and the bail that is at arraignment.
There's no
So-
bail that's during a citation.
Or whatever, they,
Never.
what, you understand what I'm
When a
saying?
person's being
When a person's being arrested.
When a person-
Well, they're held.
There's some officers that now give somebody a citation that has bail. You don't do that.
Well, but there are people who are sitting in jail waiting to
Right.
be arraigned.
Okay.
Right?
All right, so
and they
that's-
could get out,
okay.
and they can get out of money.
Right,
I'm
yeah.
happy to explain that to you.
Yeah, but what I'm asking is, but the number, the
Yeah.
amount can change.
Yes.
And I'm wondering if.
Yes.
The
So,
number would
yes.
change at court.
Yeah.
And it's stay.
Right,
Yes.
but yeah, so the answer to the question is, I will go back and look, because I have dates. Well, so here's the thing, right, because I got this data a month before,
Yeah, of course.
right? And this was a really big report that I did in 3 months, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have dates. I have a lot of dates. So I can look at the date the bail was imposed compared to the incident dates, compared to the arraignment date. I've got lots of dates. I got all sorts of dates. So I can do that,
Okay.
and certainly get a better sense of these data.
Yeah,
This is the first time the judiciary has actually been able to pull this data.
yeah.
And so we're still working through what the parameters are. There was a lot of, there was a section in there on how many people were able to pay the bail. And that data is no good. And so we have to figure out why that data is no good. And we're working with the judiciary on that. That's a huge question.
Yeah.
Who can pay the bail? Yeah.
So Tom, did you
Okay,
want?
so, well, just.
Yeah, correct me,
I know that this is what I do. I move them back and forth. So to get to court, first of all, if I arrest you and there's no Rule 3 exception to hold you, I give you a citation with a date on it. There's no bail involved at all. I don't call anybody. I just give you that citation. You go to court. The judge at that point, when you show up, could say, well, wait a minute, this is your 75th time, and he can put bail on you, and then I bring you to jail at that point
Because you can't
on
pay it.
bail. It could be 200, could be $1, could be whatever. Or I arrest you in the middle of the night or off hours, whatever, or there's no judge available. I call a judge and they set bail at that time. There's no citation. They just set bail with a condition to come to court on the first arraignment day and time.
And that's the number that's what.
Right, yeah, there's no citation
So
involved.
what would you call that?
A lodging,
After hours.
So
you're a lodging.
a lodging bail,
Yeah,
After
after hours
hours
bail. Okay, so I guess so I appreciate the
Yeah, yeah,
clarification.
yeah.
I didn't mean to.
Yeah, no, and then you would go to court, have your arraignment. That's just to secure you until,
And so the difference in those two numbers and whether that number is like if you have the holding after hours bail, and then if you still have bail when you get arraigned, that's the question.
Yeah, okay.
they will change that all the
Yeah.
time.
Oh, it changes all of these.
Exactly.
Oh,
Or release
Yes.
it.
or they release it. all.
Oh, yeah, they strike it, yeah.
It'll be 20 grand down to
Yeah.
10 grand.
Right.
Here.
Yeah.
There's a lot more to learn on bail.
There is, yes, there is.
I mean, and I know we have some just basic, no, this is a good conversation because this is very
You
helpful.
can see here, based on,
Yeah, so what we did is I just kind of, I just categorized based on things you generally ask me. Like, was there any violence on the docket? Was there any felony on the docket? Was there any violations of conditions of release on the docket? So now you could be in more, right, the same person could have violence, felony, and a VCOR on the same docket, right? So that's, so they can appear more than once in the data.
So we're gonna probably have to have you back.
Okay.
Because, I know people have some meetings at noon.
Okay, yeah.
But I did have one last question for you that I wanted to ask, and I can't remember what the hell it was. Yeah, we're gonna have you back, and then I'll remember what that question is. But,
okay,
We were always happy to be here.
yeah, it has to do with the timing of this, because, in a trend, because we changed the bail law in, I can't remember what act number it is, 135, I think, last year, where if somebody has a subsequent violation or offense, that the $200 doesn't apply. And I'd love to understand if we can tease out if there's been any noticeable impact on individuals being held on bail beyond, over $200.
Yeah, we would need new data.
I don't think we got data from after that law going into effect.
Yeah, or it was like only a month's worth of data, yeah.
Okay.
They'd have to get a new data extract.
Let's find out how difficult it is to get such data from court. And Judge Zone is there and he can ask.
Yeah, I was like,
Judge Zone, thank you for, hopefully you have, getting multitasking and not just, although this has all been very interesting.
I have been listening intently and I keep going, I had my notes here going, okay, hit this, hit that. But yes, let me know when you need me to come back. I do have a meeting to go to at noon that I would be at, but I would be happy to address the issue of bail in terms of, I think Representative Oliver was nailing it. There are some nuances to that, but and then Representative Goodnow's questions about the changing of bail and your questions about Act 138 and its impact. I have information on that. In fact, I just got a most recent sheet today for offenders in bail from the Department of Corrections. And it does show the amounts under 1,000 and you can see the crimes. And so that might be something that you can utilize to discern whether Act 138 has had an impact. But my quick review of it indicated that, and my information from judges is that the answer is yes, it has had an impact on some cases.
So we'll probably have you back on the 18th, already planning ahead. It's not going to happen next week, but I want to continue this discussion on bail because we're likely to take up a bill related to revocation of bail. So bail is going to be a topic for us. And if there's more information between now and then, we can talk offline as well. But thank you. I'm sorry we didn't get to you, Judge Zoning and the other witnesses that we did have lined up. But this was very helpful and very informative, and we'll continue.